The rain had been falling in uneven sheets all evening, drumming against the old windows of my father's house with a rhythm that matched the uneasy pulse in my chest. I hadn't seen him in over 3 years, not since the quiet collapse of my mother's illness left me scrambling to fill a void I wasn't ready to face. And yet, here I was, standing at his doorstep, suitcase in hand, rehearsing the words I didn't know how to say. When he opened the door, I barely recognized the man behind it. Age had carved subtle lines into his face, and his hair, once dark and untamed, now carried streaks of silver that caught the dim light like threads of metal. He smiled, a hesitant, almost fragile gesture, and for a moment I was struck by how human he seemed, how much I had missed the simple comfort of his presence. "Emily," he said, voice low and careful, as though speaking too loudly might shatter something delicate between us. "You're here earlier than I expected," I swallowed, forcing a calm I didn't feel. I thought it was time to catch up." The words felt hollow even as I spoke them, and I sensed he knew it. He stepped aside, letting me enter, and the familiar scent of old books and pine polish enveloped me, a smell I had carried in memory for years. The living room was dimly lit, cluttered but lived in, a space that had once felt warm, but now seemed weighted with silence. As I set my suitcase down, he perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped in a way that suggested both anticipation and restraint. "I'll make some tea," he murmured, heading to the kitchen. The scrape of his shoes against the tile echoed like a subtle warning. Tonight, he wasn't just welcoming me home. He was bracing himself, and I could feel the tension in the air like static before a storm. I wandered toward the window, watching the rain pool along the gutters. The street outside was empty, the neighborhood asleep, yet I felt eyes on me, from the past, from memories I had tried to bury. There was so much I needed to say, but the words clung stubbornly to my throat, trapped behind the fear that whatever I revealed tonight might break the fragile thread keeping us connected. When he returned with 2 steaming cups, our eyes met across the coffee table. For the first time since I had arrived, I felt the unspoken weight between us, the secrets, the misunderstandings, and the long-standing questions that had been left unanswered. He didn't ask me why I'd come. I didn't ask him why he'd stayed silent. Instead, we sipped our tea in a quiet tension that spoke louder than words ever could. And in that fragile, fleeting moment, I realized this reunion wasn't just about reconnecting. It was about confronting truths we had both been too afraid to name. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon and old wood as my father set the cups on the table, the steam curling in delicate spirals between us. I studied his hands, strong, weathered, the knuckles knotted as if carrying invisible burdens, and wondered how many years of solitude had etched themselves into such quiet details. He sat opposite me, posture rigid, eyes flicking toward mine, as if measuring how much of himself he could safely reveal. "I didn't expect you to come back so suddenly," he said, breaking the silence. There was a hesitancy in his voice, a careful calculation in every word. "Life. It has a way of catching up to us." I nodded, unsure if I wanted to press him or retreat. "I've been avoiding it," I admitted softly. "Avoiding you, avoiding the questions I couldn't answer. But I can't anymore. I need to understand everything that happened." He exhaled slowly, leaning back. "It's not an easy story," he said. His gaze drifted to the rain-streaked window, and I could sense the memories rising unbidden, shadows he had tried to lock away. "There are things I've done, choices I've made, things I thought would protect you, protect all of us. But sometimes protection isn't enough. Sometimes it only makes the truth heavier." I felt a pang of guilt for the resentment I had carried toward him all these years. Resentment born from absence, from unanswered questions, from whispered rumors I never dared confront. Now, sitting across from him, I realized how little I truly knew about the man who had raised me, and how much of his story had been hidden behind walls of silence. "I guess I always wondered why you kept things so close," I said, letting the words fall gently. "Why you never let anyone in. Not me, not Mom. No one." He looked at me then, a flicker of something unguarded in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or fear. "I thought distance would keep you safe," he murmured. "Safe from disappointment, from pain, from my own mistakes. But safety has a cost, and the cost is always higher than I imagined." For a moment, the rain outside seemed to fade into insignificance, leaving only the tension between us. The years of misunderstanding, of longing and fear, pressed into the room like an invisible weight. I realized that what I had come for wasn't just answers, it was acknowledgement. A recognition that we had both carried burdens in silence, that the mistakes of the past were ours to bear together, not apart. I reached instinctively for my cup, gripping it as if it could anchor me to this fragile connection. "I want to understand," I whispered. "Not to judge, not to blame, just understand." He nodded slowly, eyes softening. "Then you'll have it. But it won't be easy. Some truths are heavier than the heaviest storm." And in that moment, I sensed that tonight would change everything, not because the past could be undone, but because we were finally confronting it, face to face, with no illusions left between us. The night deepened around us, and the rain outside had turned into a steady drizzle that tapped rhythmically against the roof. I watched my father move with a strange hesitancy, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Each gesture seemed measured, every word weighed. I realized with a sinking clarity that the man before me was not just my father, but a stranger shaped by years of secrets and solitude. "I need to tell you something," he began, his voice low, almost trembling. "Something I should have shared long ago. It's complicated." He paused, and I noticed the way his eyes flickered toward the darkened hallway, as if the walls themselves were witnesses to what he had been hiding. After she passed, I made decisions I thought were right, but they left scars. Not just for me, but for everyone I care about, including you. I clenched my hands around my cup, the warmth doing little to steady the knot in my chest. "What kind of decisions?" I asked, forcing calm into my voice, though my heart was hammering. He hesitated, the weight of unspoken truths pressing between us. "I trusted the wrong people," he said finally. "I allowed someone close to me to manipulate circumstances, and I didn't protect you the way I should have. I thought I was shielding you from pain, but I only delayed it, and made it worse." The words settled heavily in the room. Memories I had long suppressed surfaced, fractured moments from childhood, times I had sensed tension without understanding its source. I had always blamed myself for the distance between us, but now I realized that the gap had been carved by choices beyond my control, choices I had never been allowed to see. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Why keep it hidden?" He looked down at the floor, ashamed. "I was afraid. Afraid that knowing the truth would change how you see me, afraid that it would break you. I underestimated your strength, and I overestimated my ability to carry the burden alone." The room seemed to constrict around us, the air thick with tension and unshed words. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of understanding, mingled with anger, confusion, and a reluctant compassion. The father I had resented for his distance was also a man grappling with his own mistakes, his own regrets. I reached across the table tentatively, feeling the need to bridge the years of silence with a simple gesture. "I don't fully understand yet," I said, "but I want to. I need to know everything, even if it hurts." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "Then I'll tell you. But you have to promise me one thing. You won't look at me with the same judgment. Not yet, not until you hear it all." I swallowed hard, nodding. The storm outside had slowed, but inside, a different kind of storm was rising, one that promised to shake the foundations of everything I thought I knew. And somehow, I knew that by the end of this night, nothing would ever feel the same again. He took a deep breath, folding his hands in front of him as if bracing against an invisible storm. "It's time you know everything," he said. His voice wavered, revealing the weight he had carried for so long. "After your mother passed, I found myself alone, and I made a mistake, one that changed the course of both our lives." I leaned forward, heart pounding, sensing that the truth I had been chasing for years was finally within reach. "What happened?" I whispered. "There was someone, an old friend," he began, eyes fixed on the floor. "Someone I thought I could trust completely. They took advantage of my absence, of my grief. They manipulated situations, made choices for me that I couldn't control, and I let it happen. I convinced myself I was protecting you by staying silent. But in reality, I was only complicit in my own failure. I felt a jolt, the pieces of old memories clicking into place, the nights I had felt the tension in the house, the whispers I had overheard, the subtle changes in his demeanor. They weren't just figments of my imagination. They were fragments of a larger, more complicated truth. I don't understand, I murmured, fighting to keep my voice steady. Who? What do you mean? He looked up, eyes glistening with unshed tears. It wasn't your fault, he said firmly. And it wasn't ever about you. It was about me, my pride, my fear, and my failures. I allowed deception to flourish under my watch, and I betrayed my own values in the process. I betrayed the trust you placed in me as a daughter. The room seemed to shrink around us. The tea had long gone cold, forgotten on the table, as the raw weight of his confession filled every corner. For a long moment, silence hung between us, a silence heavy with regret, sorrow, and a fragile hope that truth might somehow be enough to begin healing. I carried this alone because I didn't want to hurt you, he admitted, but I see now that the worst harm comes from silence, from pretending everything is okay when it isn't. I've lost years to my own fear, but I can't lose any more. I need you to understand me, not as the father who failed, but as the man who is trying, in whatever way he can, to make amends. I swallowed, my throat tight with emotion. Rage, sorrow, and relief collided in an unsteady wave. I don't know if I can forgive it yet, I said, voice shaking. But I need to understand. I need the truth. That's why I came. He nodded slowly, a fragile weight lifting from his shoulders. Then you'll have it, he whispered. All of it. Every mistake, every regret. And you can choose how to carry it, how to move forward. I only ask that you see me. Not just the failures, but the man who has always loved you despite everything. For the first time in years, I felt the walls between us begin to crumble. The storm outside had faded, leaving the quiet aftermath of rain. But inside, something far more profound was taking shape. An honest, painful, and necessary connection forged from truth, no matter how heavy it was to bear. The house felt different in the quiet aftermath, as if the walls themselves had exhaled the weight of years spent holding secrets. I sat across from my father, the air between us no longer tense but tentative, fragile as the first light of dawn filtering through rain-streaked windows. The truth had been spoken, laid bare like fragile glass, and now all that remained was what we would do with it. I watched him sip his tea, hands trembling slightly, and realized that this man, the same one I had longed for understanding from, the one I had both admired and resented, was still human. Flawed, fragile, and capable of mistakes, yes, but also capable of courage, of honesty, of facing the consequences he had hidden from me for so long. I don't think I can forget this, I admitted, voice quiet but steady. But I think maybe I can forgive it in time. Maybe I can forgive you and myself for holding on to anger that wasn't entirely mine to bear. He looked up, relief and pain mingling in his gaze. That's all I've ever hoped for, he murmured. Not immediate forgiveness, not absolution, just understanding, and a chance to rebuild what's been broken. For a long while, we simply sat there, letting the silence carry the weight of reconciliation. Outside, the rain had stopped entirely, leaving the streets glistening under the pale light of morning. Inside, I felt something shift between us, a subtle, unspoken acknowledgement that while the past could not be undone, it could be faced together, honestly, without pretense or avoidance. I thought about the years lost to misunderstanding, the unspoken fears and withheld truths. And yet, for the first time in a long while, I felt hope. Hope that even in the midst of mistakes and regrets, connection could still be restored. That even when people falter, love, though complicated, fragile, and imperfect, remained. I think this is the beginning, I said softly, almost to myself, not the end. And maybe that's what matters most, not that everything is fixed, but that we're moving forward, together, even if slowly. He nodded, a small, weary smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Together, he echoed, and as I watched him, really saw him, I understood that some truths are heavy, some mistakes irreparable, and yet the willingness to face them, openly, courageously, can transform the weight of the past into the foundation for something new. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years I felt ready to meet it. Not alone, but with him.